Ballad of Johnny Arcane by Jim Nail, read by Jim Nail. Is that backwards? Anyhow, The Ballad of Johnny Arcane by Jim Nail, read by Jim Nail. Chapter 6, The Dolmens. True to the map, the northbound road followed the levee of the river only upstream as it flowed to the south. Here the only was so wide, the groves on the opposite shore looked like shrubs, and there wasn't a bridge in sight. He hadn't gone long before he came to a fallen tree blocking any passage except for foot travel. Here he sat and drank some water from his canteen. Then he pulled the metal container from the backpack and opened it. There were a few scraps of parchment inside with nothing on them. He scattered these to the wind and laid the open container on the ground. In the backpack he found the map that Burly Man had drawn, depicting all the landmarks on the road between Kinghorn and Stubblefield. Castor Bean's map was much simpler, basically a curved line that stayed on the west side of the river, with two roads departing westward, words indicating their destinations. To Chokeberry, to Footbomb. About 2 days out, there was a single square on the riverside of the road with the words, The Dolmens. He straightened the edges of Burly Man's map and flattened it into the metal box. Then he produced something else from the pack. Folded 4 times, it was the picture Lucy had given him. The waterfall with its unimaginably fine detail. This, too, he pressed flat into the metal box. He replaced the box in the pack and drew out the message he was carrying from Castor Bean to Pan Clangbanger in the town of Sputum. What could it possibly say? He burned with curiosity. Pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and surely one piece was sealed inside that envelope. But he dared not open it. He slipped the message back into his pack and continued on his way. That night, he stayed with the ferryman and his wife in their hut on stilts above the river. The ferryman had a boat that he used to ferry people across to the town of Candlewax on the other side. After supper, Johnny spread Castor Bean's map on the floor and scrawled the word ferryman at the bend where the ferryman's hut stood. And across the river, Candlewax. Then he took Castor Bean's message out and patted it with his fingers as if he could read its contents by the contours of the parchment. The next day was hot, and the river flowed under an open sky with barely a tree in sight. To the west, endless fields of corn and turnips. To the east, only the river only, so wide he had no idea of what lay beyond it. As he walked, he scrolled through the events of his night in Stubblefield. Miles Castor Bean in his strange robes, flanked by Old Youngfellow and Caraway. The tour of wines and Caraway's detachment on the hillside as he described the comings and goings of the river. Later, there were the mayor's mysterious words about the people who weren't there. And then the crazy smoke and the rhythm that draw him into the crowd, into the dance that led to the fight between the vineyard people and the mill workers. And that night he dreamt of Lucy and woke in fear and the red-haired girl came in and comforted him. But of all the memories, none obsessed him more than the words he had brought from King Corn to Stubblefield. I believe that Borderbinder has returned. He is the one who brings this message. His name is Arcane. And all the while, the envelope he was bearing from Stubblefield to Sputum burned like an ember at his back. Far ahead on the river's wide curve, he saw a building dancing in the heat mirage. This would be the Dolmens. If lacking in detail, Casterbean's map was at least accurate. A crow leapt from the branches of a dead tree, touched briefly in the road, cawed at him, then flew on as if beckoning him to follow. But of course he had no choice. There was only the road and the river. As he drew nearer, the form of the building took shape, a log house with a steep barn-like roof and a stone chimney, one lone willow, and to the left, on the riverside, there were 3 strange objects, towers, several times taller than a man, upright and branching in a series of arms at the top, segmented appendages hanging down from the fingers. They were too regular to be part of the natural world. They could only have been made by humans. Only as he approached the steps of the establishment did he notice something else. Across the river, obscured by the haze, stood 3 more towers, identical to those beside the log house. For a moment he thought he saw threads like spider webs spanning the river from tower to tower. But then the light shifted and they disappeared. In the gloom of the log house, 2 men sat at a table drinking beer and playing a game of barn nails. The house mistress leaned on the counter in a dirty apron. "Welcome, traveler," she said in a lazy voice. "I need a meal and a bed," Johnny announced. "We got that, if you don't mind a little cat in your food." Johnny threw down his pack and sat with the men at the table. "How do you play this game?" They showed him the moves and allotted him a pile of square nails. They filled him a glass of beer from the pitcher. The house mistress brought him a bowl of cold stew and then sat down and joined the game. So what are the towers outside?" Johnny asked after a few moves. "What are they for?" "Oh, them be the Dolmens," said one of the men. "That's why they call us the Dolmens, because of the dolmens outside." "What are dolmens?" "Dolmens are things made by people long ago, back in no time, before the fire and the bandits. There's hardly any dolmens left in this world anymore, and we got 'em." "Yeah, that's right, Jimson," chided the house mistress. "People flock from miles around just to see our dolmens." "Well, they do," said Jimson. "It's an extinguishing feature. Hereby lies a mystery. Sometimes at night I hear 'em talking to each other right across the river." "Oh yeah? What do they say?" asked the other man. "Maybe they say, 'Hey, over there, I want to have your baby.'" The house mistress let out a husky, masculine chuckle. "You fellas are full of beans." "But where are the other dolmens?" asked Johnny. "You suggested there were others." "Hell, I don't know. I don't care, though. We got the dolmens." "What about the blinkers?" Do you suppose the blinkers are dolmens? The blinkers? Nah, the blinkers are just stars that blink. Johnny poured himself another glass. It took 3 beers to wash down the fetid taste of the stew. He got a little tipsy and he started telling stories. He said that there were all kinds of wonders in the world. There was a slime that lived on the forest floor, and when it needed light, it turned into a creature with legs, and it crawled across the forest to reach the light, and then it broke back down into a slime again. Once when he was hungry, a weasel brought him a quail to eat. He told them that once he saw a man produce flame from his fingertips, and he described how people traveled by boat at harvest time to work the vineyards at Stubblefield. Oh, we see them all the time, said Jimson. They stop here and make a mess of things with their crazy antics. But they're not near as bad as the black coats. Black coats? Yeah, the black coats. They don't talk at all. They come here and they eat and they sleep, and afterwards they leave a stink so bad we have to throw away the sheets. They're up to no good, them black coats. Johnny drank 1 more beer after that. Then he picked up his pack and stumbled off to his room. There was a little desk next to the bed. On this, he flattened Castor Bean's map with his scratch pen, and he wrote the dolmens in tiny letters across the river from where he sat. Then he took out Castor Bean's message to Clangbanger, threw it on the table, and stared at it for a long time. The room spun slowly in his drunkenness. A candle by the bedside flickered. He got up and took the candle over to the desk. The sun went down, and still he sat there, staring at the letter. Another piece of the puzzle. Some things were more important than others. What if he had a destiny to fulfill, something higher and loftier than just the delivery of messages or the strumming of mandolins at harvest dances? Do some codes carry more weight than others? What if it was necessary for him to know at any cost what waited in the road ahead? And who was he really, and why was he placed here? It was his imperative to find out. He lifted the letter and held it over the candle flame. Slowly, the wax seal began to soften. He picked at it with his fingernails until at last it broke loose. Intact, the insignia unblemished. With great care and trembling hands, he lifted the flap, extracted the parchment, and unfolded it onto the desk. His heart beat wildly as he read the words. My dear Clangbanger, the east gutter of the house is sagging badly and the downspout is cracked. I can prop the gutter with boards, but the spout must be replaced. Please fashion a new one as soon as you can and send it down by boat. The rain will soon be here. Remember, time is shorter than it is long. Castor Bean. Johnny closed his eyes. He felt himself falling into a great abyss. He felt his heart, so recently throbbing with potency, suddenly break open and empty itself of its contents. Like the bowels of some hideous creature in a dark and boggy swamp. He heard 2 voices audibly, one directly after the other. First, his mother fingering the broken seal of the envelope. Corn-damn messengers, no purity these days. Then the woman who gave him the armband at Cornfest. It's hard to find a good messenger anymore, leastways an honest one. What have I done? He cried out loud, and he flung himself onto the bed and wept.
Johnny Arcane was a man that legend loved to follow. And even though he moved about, stories seemed to send him out and link him to the scene. Because of this, he